Hi, my name's Sam. Welcome to my channel. This is Frugalisama, where I talk about all things dressmaking. Today is day 28 of 100 days of sewing, and I've got a tutorial today of how to make these face masks, these origami face masks in batches. Sewing in multiples and sewing them a bit more quickly than the original pattern. The original pattern is by Romilda Dias. And they're called the Origami face masks. I'm going to run through the original pattern to start off with because it was originally done in Portuguese, so I'm going to give you the English version of how to make them with these tabs on them first, and then I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to make them in batches and a little bit more quickly. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's subscribed to my channel so far, and if you're new, welcome. It's lovely to have new people along. You don't need to watch any of these videos in any kind of order. I'm just putting together 100 videos for anybody who's either new to sewing, or wants to pick up some tips and tricks, or if you're sewing on a budget as well. I've made these particular masks out of an old duvet cover. The rest of them have been made from remnants. They've not cost me very much at all. So sewing on a budget is a big thing for me. So if you would like to see more videos like this, please subscribe. There is a subscription bell below. It will let you know whenever new videos are being released. I love reading your comments below. If you've got any comments about today's video, or if you've got any videos that you want me to make in the future, please leave me a comment below. That means a lot to me. And on to today's video. What I'm going to do is I will put in timestamps in the description below, so that if you don't want any part of this video, you can just skip to the bit that you do need. But I will recap how the Romilda Dias mask of covering works first, so that you know you can give that a go first if you've never given it a go, and then I will show you how I've just adapted the pattern slightly so that you can sew it in batches and a little bit more quickly and efficiently. The original pattern starts with a piece of paper that is 22 centimetres across by 11 centimetres down. So hopefully you can see that. You then fold that piece of paper in half and you mark up from the edge 2.5 centimetres each side and draw a line from there right into the centre, giving you that peak. And then you cut that out, leaves you with a shape like that, and you cut 4 pieces of fabric that shape. And then for your tabs, you cut 2 pieces which are 9 centimetres by 5 centimetres. And then I'll just show you how you put them together before you start sewing. The flap pieces, you just fold them in half lengthwise, wrong sides together, so the right side is facing out. Put a little R on there for right side so that you can see that the right side is facing out. Do that with both of those. And then if your fabric has got a right side and a wrong side, or if you've got a motif, I've got a butterfly in the middle of mine, you put that right side up. Again, I've put an R on there so you know. Put that right side up like that. Put your right side of one of your flat pieces on top, so that the long straight edges are meeting in the middle. And then you put the other one at the bottom. Make sure these points are aligned, and then you get what would be your lining piece. And again, if you've got a right side and a wrong side, the right side then goes face down on top of that. So you've got a flap sandwich. Make sure everything lines up, that your peaks are aligned up there and there. And you're going to take that to the sewing machine, and you're just going to sew round there, up to that peak, pivot round, back down, leave these short sides open, and do the same at the top and at the bottom. And you can pin it if you want, it's up to you. and make sure that you do a back stitch at the beginning and at the end of each line of sewing. So using 1/4 inch seam allowance or the edge of your presser foot, whichever you're most comfortable with. You can put pins in there if you like. I'm going to use a contrast thread so that you can see where I've sewn. So there we have it all sewn together. I've just done it in a thread so that you can see. And then you just need to just see where that peak is there. Just put a notch in, cut a notch in, just to turn it through. It's not all that necessary really. It turns, on a small seam allowance, it actually turns through fine. You've got your notches there, and then you're going to pull it through. I'm going to birth your mask. A little bit fiddly here. If you've got a loop turner, it's like this, you can use that. It's quite obvious which is the right and the wrong side on this one because you've got a giant butterfly on the right side, and you're just going to give it a good press so that the flaps are to the inside, to the wrong side of the mask or covering, whatever you want to call it. Gently roll, flap to the wrong side, and give it a good press, and then I'll come back and I'll show you what we're going to do next. So there we have it all pressed in, flaps to the wrong side, and we're just going to top stitch now along these long pointed edges, not the short edges at all. Top stitching it, you're keeping, you're just giving some sort of structure to the mask. Try and do it about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. If your machine has got a setting on it like this, if I put that to number 1 on this Janome XL601, it will send my needle to the left, and I can just line up that edge, and it'll give me like 1/8 of an inch. So that's it, top stitched. That's your mask top stitched around the long edges. Your next step is to flip it over so you've got flap side up. Take the right sides of your tabs and position them centrally on the short ends of that mask there. So just as evenly as you can possibly get them, and you're just going to sew once again at either your machine foot's width or 1/4 of an inch down those sides, and then I'll come back and we'll show you what to do next. Once you've got these tabs sewn onto each side of your mask or covering, whatever you want to call it, like that, you're then going to go to the ironing board and press these sides in like that. Press those in, and then press this one, this outside edge that's not sewn on, in by about 1 centimetre on each side, and then you need to press them all to the right side of the mask so that you've got it overlapping upside down, so that you've got it overlapping like that. Overlapping like that. Bob a pin or a clip in, whichever you want. You don't have to if you don't need to. You don't want to. Same on both sides. What I try to do is, if you can see from the side there, I try to have this one at the front a little bit lower down than one at the back. Otherwise you're going through lots and lots of layers of fabric when you sew that down, and your machine might not take too kindly to it. Try and get them even, so that they're the same size, but you're just going to be sewing now down the edge there on both sides. Like I said, try and get them as even as possible, but try not to go through all those layers. If you've got a walking foot on your machine, it might not give you any trouble, but if you might just find that it objects a little bit to so many thicknesses. You've probably got about 12 layers of fabric there. It doesn't seem it, but you've got a lot. And then give it a final snip off your threads, and it's just time to put your elastic in. You can either use a safety pin or a bodkin, and then you can, if you know that your length of your elastic, if you've made a couple before, you know what length you need. I'm using 22 centimetres here. Just thread them through. If you know your size, then you can sew it up. If you're giving it to somebody and you're not sure, You might be as well just leaving a little bit of extra elastic so that can tie a knot in there, or I find that a little bit wasteful because you need a little bit extra to tie a knot, and there's always the risk of it coming undone. Or you can just put it under your machine and do a zigzag stitch. I tend to hide the join inside that little tab there, just to make it a little bit neater. If you've left me knot a bit big so I can undo it and sew it. So yeah, you just bob it like that, and that's it done. If you're going to be using a zigzag stitch to sew it, just pin it. I've got an overlap of about 1.5 centimetres there. Again, this is completely personal. You can use a longer piece of elastic. Elastic's a bit scarce at the moment, so I'm trying to use as little as possible. I remove my free arm on there just to give me a little bit more room to get underneath. I've altered my stitch length to 2.5 width, and the length is 1.5. And if you just start with your needle down, always test stitch it first before you start. You might find you need to tug on your elastic a little bit just to give it a bit of encouragement. If you've got a machine that's got a walking foot on it, or if you've got a walking foot, that might help it go through a little bit. And I usually go backwards and forwards once just to make sure it's secure. Snip your threads and twizzle it round so that it's hidden inside. And there you have it. So it's just these tabs that I feel that are a little bit not faffy, but that they add time to the sewing, because you're going backwards and forwards with you're sewing it, you're pressing it, you're going back, and then you're sewing it again. So I've adapted the pattern, and I will show you now how I've adapted the pattern to make these very similar, just a slight difference to the pattern. So you can make them a little bit more in batches and more quickly. So I'll come back and show you how to do those. So onto equipment. Sewing machine, obviously. You can cut with scissors, or you can cut with a cutting mat and a rotary cutter. Rotary cutter is my preferred way of cutting, but obviously you can use scissors if you've got them. Something to mark your fabric with if you're using scissors. So I use these. It's not actually a friction pen, but it evaporates when you iron onto it. So if you're going to use a template and draw around it, these are great because they iron off. Scissors. I keep my snips around my neck and my tape measure. Tape measure is only used for the elastic, so you don't really need, you're not measuring anything else really. But some sort of ruler. I've been using a quilting ruler. That's just to make your template. So just a normal regular ruler is absolutely fine. You don't need a quilting ruler at all. What I found a real time saver is these loop turners. They're just a couple of pounds online. They've got a hook at the top there, which grasps onto your fabric, and you pull it through when you're pulling your mask through. I do find those a huge time saver with this. Iron and ironing board, and I've used quilting clips. Again, I just find them easier than pins, but obviously if you've got pins, you use pins. I'll insert a picture of everything that you need. And then just a couple of A4 pieces of paper and card, and that's to make your template. So this is a shirting cotton that I've been using for the ones that I've been demonstrating to get today, and as you can see, there isn't a direction in this print, and that will speed up your process considerably. If you've got something like this Liberty that's just like a little ditzy print all over, or the shirt that I'm wearing, something like that where you're not having to line up your pattern all the time, obviously that's going to speed up your sewing process. The ones that I made previously, that have got the butterflies on the front, that took considerably longer because I was placing the pattern over there, fussy cutting I think they call it. So that took a little bit longer because I was trying to get a butterfly sort of central or some sort of motif on there. So that's going to take a little bit more time. The rest of it, I just used any old fabric, and I've just used the same on the inside. And this is an old duvet that I cut up. This is polycotton, which is absolutely fine. Any sort of light to medium weight cotton. So you've got your Liberty Tarnalon. It's flimsier than like a quilting cotton. Quilting cottons are absolutely fine, 100% cotton, a little bit thicker, so think about breathability. And for the lining, I've just used a plain, this is actually a curtain lining, and it's only about £2 a metre. For the linings, I've been using this on the ones that I've been making today, just as a contrast. Just makes it easier to know which is the right and the wrong side, and keeps the costs down a little bit as well if you're using something like that. And I think that's a cotton as well, a little bit thicker than the shirting cotton that I've been using, but it's absolutely fine. And again, you've know what it's about, which is the right side and which is the wrong side, or even what you're doing with the pattern placement. You can use lightweight jersey on the inside. That will make it a little bit softer. That's your fabric. Your other materials really that you need is just elastic. This is a 5mm elastic, and just know that all elastic isn't made equally. See, that's got a little bit of a picot on it, the one in my left hand here. I would say that's closer to an underwear elastic, whereas this is just like your normal elastic. And when I say it's not created equally, there's a lot more stretch in the normal ribbed elastic than there is in this. And I think the recovery is slightly better as well. When I've sewn this, getting it under the foot and doing a zigzag on it, sometimes you have to pull on it a little bit just to force it through the machine. And I've noticed that it can stretch out from this. So I would definitely check the length of elastic that you need before you start cutting it down. It's okay if it's too long, but you don't want to waste it. But if it's too short, then you've definitely wasted it. So just check on that. So that's just your materials that you need. And then to cut your pattern. So to make your template, for the quicker way of doing it, or for the batch cutting way of doing it, you take an A4 piece of paper. If you don't get an A4 piece of paper, it measures 21 centimetres in width and 30 centimetres in length. And you're going to draw a line which is 4 centimetres in. So that's your first step. Second step is to fold a piece of paper lengthwise and then into quarters. So you're left with a piece that size. So once you've folded it into quarters, you then measure in 2.5 centimetres from the bottom and from the top. Make a mark. On one side of your paper, you draw a straight line at 90-degree angle to that 4 centimetre mark out to the end. You make a diagonal line from that 4 centimetre mark down to the centre of that piece of paper, and that's on the top and the bottom. So first you do a straight line out to the end and a diagonal down to the centre, top and bottom. That's on one side. And then on the other side, you're just drawing a line from that 2.5 centimetre mark into the centre, at both top and bottom, and you're not doing the little bit out, which is your tab. And then you just want to open out your paper. You're going to cut along that horizontal line there, and then you're going to fold each piece of paper back in half, and you're going to cut your first one. You're getting rid of that 4 centimetres there, you're just cutting across there. You're left with a piece like that, which I call like a lozenge shape. Second piece, you're going to cut along there and down there, along there and down there, and you're left with a piece like this. So you've got two templates. You've got one like that and you've got one like that. So effectively what you're doing is you're actually combining your tab piece with your main mask piece, and you don't have that extra tab piece to sew on, and it just saves that fiddling about with that tab piece. So the next thing I would suggest is you trace each piece onto a template of cardboard. Just use an oat cereal packet or something like that. Trace around it, so you're left with a piece like that, and a piece like that. And I've actually cut more than one. I've got 2 of the long ones, and I've got 4 of the shorter ones. Cut 4 of them to demonstrate, but they do come in handy. You don't have to cut 4. 1 is plenty, especially if you're drawing around it. But if you're doing one long piece, it comes in handy to be able to visualise where everything's going to get placed. And what I would suggest is if you're tracing round more than one, use your original template every time, otherwise it's just going to get bigger and bigger and less accurate. And the more accurate you can get your templates, the easier the sewing is going to be. Cutting out is quite an essential part of all sewing, and the more accurate it can be when you're cutting out is the better, and obviously that is aided by an accurate template. So you'll notice on here I've written 11 centimetres across the widest part of this template, and that is just to give me a visual aid of how wide I need to fold my fabric. And this is I'm just going to use a small piece of fabric to demonstrate what to do. To cut more than one piece at a time, a concertina the fabric. So you fold it one way, fold it another way, and keep folding until you've got as many pieces as you feel that your rotary cutter or scissors can cut through. Obviously the thickness of your fabric is going to have an impact on this. A shirting cotton is going to cut through more easily than a quilting cotton, because quilting cotton can be a little bit thicker. So it depends on what you're using, but if you concertina it like this, so I've got 4 layers. I'm just demonstrating on this small piece of fabric that I've got as a scrap, as a remnant. But the 11 centimetres is significant because you want it to be at least that width. 12 centimetres is ideal. So if you can concertina it at sort of 12 or 13 centimetres, and here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 layers that I'm going to be able to cut through with that. I'm not actually using this fabric, this is just to demonstrate. So you can cut through 4 layers of fabric. The demonstration that I'm going to show you, I cut through 5 layers of fabric because I'm trying to do 10 in one batch. I used 150 centimetre wide fabric, and I wanted to cut out 10. And you will see in the demonstration that I managed to just about squeeze 2 lots of these on. So 2 lots of 5 is 10, that's a 10 for the front of the mask, and then I managed to squeeze 4 lots of 5 of the lozenge shaped ones alongside each other, and that gave me the 20 that I needed for the flaps. And then I just needed 10 more of the contrast fabric. So that would have taken me about 60 centimetres of fabric. So if you're buying it, I would buy 3/4 of a metre. But if you're just doing like I am and just using what you've got at home, that's just about what you need. And then you need your extra for your lining, and that will be about 1/4 of a metre. But you need the full width, so you can't a fat quarter. You can use a fat quarter, but you won't get as many out of a fat quarter. So my next bit of advice is just make sure that all your tools are sharp. So if you're using a rotary cutter, make sure that your blade's a fresh blade, and your needle's sharp in your sewing machine, that your bobbin's full, any scissors that you're using are sharp. There's nothing that impedes your speed more than blunt tools. I will go on now to show you how I cut out and did 10 masks in around about an hour, and I'll come back to you at the end. So hopefully you can see here I've got this piece of fabric is concertinaed into 5 layers. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fabric is just a little bit over 150 centimetres wide, and I've managed to get 5, 10 front pieces on, and then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of 5, and they will be the flat pieces, and that's my 20. So that's by concertinaing the fabric by around about 12 centimetres, 12 fives, 60 centimetres of fabric. And then you just need a separate piece of fabric, and you can actually do it in the same fabric, but you will need to cut another 10 of these, and you could do that folding it over again and doing 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. You can get that out of another concertina if you want it in the same fabric. I want it in a contrast fabric, and so I'm going to do that in the contrast with this one. And instead of doing it full length like that, which can be a little bit unwieldy, you can just fold it in half and then fold it over, and you could get you can get 2 lots out of there. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. You'd get 8 doing it that way. This is a slightly narrower piece of fabric. I think this is 140. But you can see there by lining them all up, I've got them buttered up to each other rather, and you can either draw around each piece and then go in with your scissors and cut round, or your rotary cutter, or you can just go straight in with your rotary cutter. And if you're just going to cut it with scissors, draw around it, and then just stabilise it with a pin to stop it moving about when you're cutting. Obviously, drawing around it first and before you cut it is going to take more time. If you go straight in with your rotary cutter, that's going to be quicker. And I've buttered them up to each other so that you've only got one cut. So I'll cut there, cut across there. So once you've cut all your pieces out, you need to fold your flap pieces, that's the shorter pieces, in half, wrong sides together, press them, and then place your longer piece, the piece with the tab attached to it, right side up, and place the flap pieces on top of that, with making sure that the peaks are aligned and everything's all nice and neat and aligned. And then with the right side down facing the flaps, you take your lining piece and place it on top and make sure that everything's all lined up. Then you put in some either clips, or if you prefer pins, or if that's what you've got, use pins, just to keep them together while you take them to the sewing machine. Put in as many as you feel you need to have, and you're going to sew from each end just on the long sides, round about 1/4 of an inch, leaving the short ends open. Do that, iron all your flat pieces and put them all together and line them up for sewing. Okay, so before you start, make sure you've got a full bobbin, a newish needle. It doesn't have to be brand new, but one that's not blunt. Have your snips to hand, and everything that you need to hand. I've moved my stitch length up to 2.6. It's just a little bit longer than the standard setting on here is 2.2. And the colour of thread is the colour of thread that I'm going to be using for top stitching. That just saves a bit of time not having to change it over halfway through. And all you're going to do is sew around about 1/4 inch down these long seams right to the end, making sure that you backstitch at each side. It is really important that you do this, otherwise when you try and pull it through, this will try and come unravelled and you'll have to do it again. You're doing both long sides and leaving the short sides open for turning through. And I'm going to do these chain style to save time. And you can either do it 1/4 inch by following the guide on your machine, or you can use the edge of your foot, which will give you a slightly bigger seam allowance. Okay, so I've got my pile of masks piled up here to one side, my empty, where I'm going to put my clips this side. Make sure you pivot at that peak, come back down. And while your first one is still under the needle and you've backstitched, you're going to feed your second one underneath. And this is like chain stitching that you would do in quilting. Don't forget to backstitch. And continue to do that until you've got through all your first side, and then you'll continue to do the same for the other side. So that's just one side sewn. And you can see they're all joined together there, and doing it that way you've just got minimum clipping. You just clip in between each one. You're not having to clip each mask down with long ends. Clip them and then go back and do the other side. Right, so this is all your masks chained together, both long sides sewn, short ends left open. Going to snip them apart like that, and then you're going to turn them through. And just before you turn them through, I would just double check that you've caught all your ends in, because you don't want to find out that you've missed some before you turn it through. And I've just found a loop turner is much easier than trying to push it through. And with a loop turner, you've got a little hook at the top there. Push it through, hook it onto one side like that, clip the little clip up so that's closed, and then just pull it through. And I find that a lot less bother. So do that for all of them. Before you turn them through, you might just want to put a notch in that V there. You can do, it's up to you. I don't bother. I just make sure that I pull it through properly. With a smaller seam allowance, I don't think you really need to. But you can just put a little notch in. Make sure you don't go through the stitching. It's just a dressmaking technique to make points lie flat. Make sure your scissors are sharp. So you've got two little points at that peak there, just to help it turn through a little bit better. Once you've turned it through, if you just give it a good tug on those corners there, one, you're testing for strength, but the other is you're actually pulling it through without having to put that notch in. So if you don't have the benefit of a loop turner, you just need to do it by hand, and you just need to keep pushing it through like this until you see it come through at the other side. Grab hold of it, pull it through that way, give it a tug. That I would suggest, if you've got a loop turner, using it is definitely a lot easier than having to push it all the way through. So your next step is back to the ironing board. You're going to turn the flaps to the inside. This one's an easy one because you've got an obvious wrong side and right side. You're turning your flaps to the inside, and you're going to press these, which were your tabs, you're going to press it over 1 centimetre or thereabouts, and then you're going to press it so it covers the raw edges there, and you're just going to bob a pin in it, or a clip, a quilting clip, whatever you want. Obviously do it a bit neater than that. But before you do that, if you know the length of elastic that you want, you can actually insert your elastic in first before you secure it. So do your pressing and then put your length of elastic in there first. And if you're confident that you know what size of elastic you want, I've been using 22 centimetres and sewing the loop. That saves you a little bit of time at the end, having to thread it through and then sew it. Okay, so that's what your masks look like before you do your final pass of stitching. I've got my elastic threaded through. So I'm going to sew all around the mask this time, and I'm going to sew from the wrong side. I'm going to start in the middle of here. I'm going to come to the edge of there, come to the edge of this tab, and I'm going to sew all the rest of that round the long pointed edge at around about an eighth of an inch. Normally when I am top stitching I would increase my stitch length, but because I'm securing these tabs at the same time, I'm going to keep this at 2.6. So don't forget to back stitch. So there we have 10 face masks done in about just over an hour, I think about an hour and 5 minutes. And if you've not already inserted your elastic, this is where a bodkin comes in handy, and it's just like a giant needle, big eye on the top, thread your elastic through, and you just insert it through the loop that you already made there, and then sew it together. But I would definitely advise just checking the length, that the length is correct. Even if you've made them before, if it's different elastic, you might find that it stretches differently. And I just do overlap it by about 1.5 centimetres, something like that, and just zigzag down there, and that's them done. So to cut your elastic, I know personally that I'm been working on 22 centimetres of elastic. That seems to work for me. Obviously if you're sewing these for other people, you might not want to actually cut the elastic. You might want to leave it a little bit longer so that they can tie it off and make their own length. But for 22 centimetres for me, that gives me a small overlap, about 1.5 centimetres, which I'd zigzag across there. And then you can either insert that into your masks before you sew, and you can either leave them loose like that, or you can put them in sewn up like that, and then you can just sew it all in one pass. Or if you don't want to do that, on occasions I've had the fabric and not the elastic, you can just thread it through with a bodkin. But to start off with, cutting your elastic, cut your first piece and use that as your template. Don't cut one piece and then another piece and then another piece using the last piece every time, because you'll just end up with a longer and longer piece of elastic. I don't know what the elastic situation, world elastic situation is at the moment, but there has been a shortage, so you don't really want to be wasting it. So I'm just keeping that original piece in my left hand and cutting all my pieces down to 22 centimetres. You cut what works for you. And just keep doing that until you've got enough. So that's it, you've got your 10 masks there, done in just about an hour, and some of them have got elastic in. I've run out of elastic again, so some of them haven't. And you just test the length before you actually stitch them together. You can tie them in a knot and then pull them through and make sure that the knot or the sewn line is underneath there. If you're making them for yourself, then obviously you can do that. You just need to measure one. But if you're making them for other people, I'd advise just leaving it loose so that they can decide for themselves what length that they want. Also, if you're giving them to other people, I would just give them the final press and press them that way. I find a lot of people get a bit confused as to how to wear them, and just wear them like that without pulling the flaps out. If you just actually press them like that and present them like that, it just makes it a little bit plainer for people to understand how they work. Hopefully you found all that useful. Please comment below if you've tried any of these methods. You might find that some of them are more useful than others, or it might be something that you already do. Let me know below if you use any of these methods, or if you've come up with any methods that save you time. With any kind of sewing. It doesn't have to be making these face coverings, it could be any kind of sewing. I have done an actual video that it was 20 tips to expedite your sewing. Some of them are included in this. Some of them aren't relevant to what we've been doing today. If you would like to subscribe for more videos like this, there is a subscription bell below. It'll give you notifications as when I'm making new videos. The 100 Days of Sewing I am recording during the week, and on a Sunday usually I will be uploading reviews and plans and that sort of thing. So I will speak to you later. Thank you for watching. Bye.